there's no wasted time in this. There is never wasted time. If this podcast, if real life podcast, for example, I have ambitions to eventually make a nice supplementary income podcasting. I think that would be awesome. It's something that I have ambitions towards. But I'm not naive to the fact that this podcast might be the first in a chain of podcasts that gets me to that point. And just because that's the case doesn't put me off the fact that real life podcast might not be the vehicle to me achieving that goal, but it's one of the vehicles on that journey. It's part of that journey. There's never wasted opportunities. And that's the kind of the quantity will lead to quality thing. It's you have to go through that. You have to make videos. You have to take photos. You have to do the thing that you want to do over and over again to get yourself to the point where you have the bare minimum requirements to succeed. And welcome to the next episode of the podcast. I'm actually not sure what episode this is going to be because I already have an episode in the pipe. So I've done my second interview episode this week. I'm super excited about the guest. I've got Jai Long coming on the podcast, the owner of the Business Map and Free the Bird wedding photography, a very, very talented creator and a very, very interesting man. But yeah, I don't know what episode this is going to be because I recorded that earlier this week. It's ready to go tomorrow. You guys will probably be listening to that previously to this. So I think this is going to be episode 33. But even though I've got that episode in the pipe, even though I'm ready to post that tomorrow, it's already been scheduled and everything's ready to go. Even though that's done, I still decided to show up today. It's Sunday here, my normal recording day. It's about my normal recording time, about 3:30 in the afternoon. And I decided to still show up because, and I want to talk about this initially because I think it's valuable to hear. Let me start my recording or my timer for my episode. But I think it's valuable to hear this because I have I'm riding such a powerful wave of momentum at the moment with this podcast. You know, I didn't even really need to convince myself to sit down and record this today. I didn't need to. There wasn't even the thought of, hey, you've got an episode already, you can take a week off. You don't need to record this episode today. There's no point because you're going to record another one next week and you just end up a week ahead or whatever it is. Like, hell, I might even release this just as a midweek bonus episode as episode 33 because I don't want to have an episode in the pipe and feel like I don't need to do that. But I was surprised by the fact that I didn't even feel like I needed to force myself to sit down, or not force myself is a bad word, but I didn't even feel like I needed to sit down and do this, to sit down and make it part of my day. And I want to start with this because I know how difficult it can feel, like starting something new. I know how stressful it can be to be starting a new workout routine. I know a lot of you who listen to the pod have started running since listening to this, and I know how difficult it can feel initially. Even for the first few months, you can go weeks or months at a time and not feel like you're gaining any momentum, not feel like it's going to get any easier. And it's not going to get any easier to get better, but it's going to become a hell of a lot easier to be consistent. To show up every single day is going to become easier. It's just going to get more difficult to get better. Making those small incremental improvements is going to become more difficult, but showing up is going to become the staple. Showing up every day is going to become the bare minimum and something that's actually easy for you to do. It's going to become easier for you to be consistent. Like if you just stick to something, if you're just unapologetically committed to making something a routine, I promise you it'll get easier. It's the power of building a habit. It's the power of making something like a podcast or making something like a YouTube channel or making something like, making online products or building a business or whatever it is. It's making those things habits. It's using habit building and using, the power of having a routine, the power of habits. I know how well I function on a routine, which is why I decided to show up today. I didn't need, but I was surprised by the fact that I didn't need to make that decision. It was kind of something where I was like, well, I might as well record an episode today. What else am I going to do? This is so much a part of my Sunday routine that it would be almost ridiculous not to record an episode. And that's the power of having something be a habit. So try to, if you are starting something, if you're starting a new running routine, if you're starting a new riding routine, if you're, starting to do triathlons like myself, a new exercise routine, you're starting a podcast, you're starting whatever it is, try to remember that it will come. That moment of making it easier for yourself, that moment of things improving, the moment of things starting to click, almost like they're, starting to make sense, or things start to become a little bit easier. You start to gain that momentum, like you're getting a little push from behind. That moment will come. That moment will come. It might take weeks. It might take months. It might take way longer than you expect it to take, but it will come. I promise you it will come. So if you're on this path, if you're on any path and you're sort of feeling a little bit overwhelmed, you're feeling a little, taken aback by the fact that it isn't getting any easier, please stick to it. It will get easier. I promise you. I hope you've had a good week this week. I really do hope you've had a good week. I had a fantastic week. I've been working like a madman on my Photoshop course. I got the interview in with Jai Long, which was a great thing to do midweek. Like I said, I've recorded solo podcasts this entire time, and I record on Sundays, which has been a really nice routine to do. But it was really interesting recording with someone else. It was nice to bounce back and forth. I'm still committed to the fact that I want to do in-person guests, because it is just, it's way better to go back and forth with someone in person than it is over Zoom. There's that level of disconnect where it's like, I'm not even fully confident that you're actually hearing what I'm saying, because it might disconnect at some point. So there's not that emotional back and forth. It's more just like you're exchanging content. So I enjoyed it. I really enjoy guest episodes. I do really enjoy that back and forth, but I really want to do them in person. I do really want to do them in person. I'm going to do an in-person episode with Mike, Liam, Hayden, Lamont, all those guys at some point very, very soon. I'm probably going to record one with Hayden next week. But I love this one-on-one. I do love this one-on-one episode. I actually got quite a bit of feedback, so I just want to say that as well. I got some feedback from you guys about last week's episode, how I said that I wanted to get to the meat of the episodes a little bit quicker. I was overwhelmed by the fact that a lot of you actually said that you really enjoy the rambling, or me just sort of talking about whatever's on my mind. I plan all these episodes. I don't just jump on here and talk shit, but I do plan all these episodes, but I plan in the conversational elements. And I got a lot of feedback from you guys saying that, hey, I actually really enjoy how laid back and relaxed your podcast is, because it makes me feel like I'm having a conversation with you. So thank you so much for that. I do really appreciate it, because I do really enjoy just sort of going off the cuff and just spending half an hour before I record this episode sort of thinking about what I want to say, but at the end of the day, just getting on here and seeing what happens and seeing what flow I jump into, because it is just a flow. It's me getting on here and chatting about my week, chatting about my reading, chatting about my training, chatting about what's on my mind, and I enjoy that. So I will try to every now and again sort of compress the episodes and make them into these short, really powerful is probably an overstatement, but I will try to make them valuable episodes every now and again. If I have a topic that comes to mind that really feels like it's going to resonate, maybe I'll commit the entire episode to just that topic. So maybe it's, a half an hour or 45-minute episode rather than an hour or an hour and a half episode, because I want that to be, the meat and potatoes of the episode. I want you guys to come in, get that info, and get out. Whereas most of the time, actually, it is going to be the topic that I want to talk about today. But there is a lot of the time where, I don't know what you guys listen to, but a lot of the time I listen to comedians. And comedians' podcasts is, yes, they're testing material. It is just them and that's what stand-up is. Stand-up is just personal stories and jokes written, layered through those personal stories. So the very nature of a comedian on a podcast is kind of rambling and bullshit. But I really enjoy the fact that they can get on and use the podcast almost like a conversation with their audience. I do enjoy the podcasts that are very deep and very valuable. I listen to Philosophize This and all that sort of stuff. But I also just enjoy Joe Rogan. I enjoy the Tiny Meat Gang podcast. I enjoy Luke and Lewis. Like those guys that just get on and have a conversation. I also need to be self-aware enough to be like, hey, Tom, you're 23 years old. You're not going to be able to provide someone with that much value, but I really enjoy podcasting. So what's the alternative? I'm going to get on here, and if you guys enjoy it, you enjoy it. If you don't, you don't. So I think that's just like the commitment that I've made to this podcast is it's going to be, it's going to be something like that's not strict and regimented in the way that I do it. But then I'll also layer those, for example, the Jai Long episode is going to be something that I guarantee a lot of you are going to find a lot of value in. It's going to be it's already done. It is a very valuable episode that I think a lot of you are going to find a lot of value in. This week has been awesome in Melbourne. If you're from Melbourne, it has been a fucking awesome week. The whole vibe of the city is very proud to be from Melbourne. Glad you stuck with this city. There are so many people that bailed and went to Queensland and went to Darwin and all that sort of stuff, but it feels really awesome. There's an air of, right now in this city, there's an air of pride that you stuck with it. There's a air of I'm stoked to be in this city again. And I feel that this week. It's been remarkable how quickly, we've only been open again, and we're not even fully open, but we've only had restaurants and cafes and shops and all that sort of stuff open for the last 3 or 4 days, and things have just, not even 3 or 4 days, sorry, almost a full week, but things have skyrocketed immediately, and it's awesome to see. So I hope you guys are having a good week. I do hope you're having a good week, and yeah, that's been my week. I could have no update for you as far as book club. I apologize. I've been a man on a mission with my course, and unfortunately that means that I'm sort of letting myself fall out of my routines a little bit and work a little bit later into the night, and that just means that my reading is few and far between. I still listen to books, so I'm right now, for those of you interested, I'm still reading Ego is the Enemy. I'm a little bit slow on that one. I'm also listening to Grit by Angela Duckworth. Very, very good look. Very, very good listen so far. I listen to that while I'm writing, so I am noticing that I should probably buy that book and read it in person, because it is a valuable book and it's full of a lot of content-heavy things that I should be really paying attention to. Not that I don't pay attention while I'm writing, but it's pretty hard to make notes and jot down ideas and that sort of stuff whilst I'm cycling. So that's my reading this week. I'm sorry for those book club listeners that feel a little deprived these last few weeks. Hopefully I'll have some updates for you on that pretty soon. But today I wanted to get into, and I'm going to get into it a little bit earlier in this episode because I think it is a long topic that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the topic of not taking things too seriously. It kind of relates to what I spoke about just before, as far as you guys really enjoying the conversational style of this podcast. I was having a conversation with Chris, Secret Creative, on Instagram last night, and he was asking me about how to come up with ideas, because it is kind of, prior to me starting a podcast, prior to me doing this, it was a very intimidating thing to confront. It was a very how am I possibly going to sit down for an hour every single week and have a conversation to a camera? How am I possibly going to maintain my viewers' attention or my listeners' attention for an hour every week? That's a lot of content. And the more I do this, the more I podcast, the more I listen to other podcasts and the variety of podcasts that I listen to, the more I recognize that you don't always need to be perfect. You don't always need to take things seriously. You don't always need to have all your ducks in a row before you get started on something and before you continue doing something. I think if I was to be overwhelmed by the fact that, let me put it this way. I've said this to a friend and they were shocked, so that you guys will probably be shocked as well. There is probably, in the 33 episodes, including this one that I've recorded so far, there's probably, let's say, I reckon 8 episodes in there that were phoning it in. There were 8 episodes in there that I finished recording and I was like, oh, I don't know if I love that episode. I'm proud of them. They were received well. They were probably better because I got on and did it, and it's probably made me better for other episodes. There's a benefit to me doing that. but they were definitely episodes where I phoned it in. They were my 70%ers. You know, they weren't failures. They weren't me jumbling over my words and bumbling about for an hour, but they were definitely me phoning it in. And I use the term phoning it in lightly. It's still a 70% episode. I still plan things. I just sat down here and didn't have as much content, or didn't have as much flow, or didn't feel like I connected to the rant that usually carries a lot of my episodes. I didn't get into that flow state. I didn't find myself locking in and going after it. It was kind of a grind for the entire episode. That's probably happened about 8 times. And that shocked my friend when I mentioned it to them, because they had in their mind that this is this big thing that I have to have planned every single week, and I have to be bang on every single week and ready to go, and the content has to be great every single week. Otherwise, it's not worth doing it. And the thing that I said to Chris last night that kind of made it okay is, like, out of all the things that you consume, out of all the content that you consume, on TV, on YouTube, in books, in podcasts, in whatever, in music, think about the fact that 90% of the time, or most, in fact, all of the time, the artists that you listen to, yes, they're going to be proud of their work. Yes, they're going to put their best foot forward, but they're not always going to hit the mark. They're not always going to put out something that is a greatest hit. They're not always going to put out something that is incredibly valuable. They're not always going to put out their best work, but they're going to put their best foot forward in order to hope to do so. You know, when I'm creating something, I don't always set out with the intention of this has to be my best work or it's not anything at all. It's like all or nothing mentality. I don't set out with that all or nothing mentality, but I set out with the intention of making my best work. Does that make sense? It's like when I get on here for the podcast, I don't think to myself, shit, if this isn't a list of items on this podcast brief that I have in front of me, I do it all in Notion. I might make a video about this if you guys value this, or share it on my story or whatever. But I don't set out and go, okay, I don't have something here that's deeply valuable for my audience. I'm just going to throw the episode away. But I also don't make that the intention every single week. I don't concern myself with the fact that I need to make something that's incredibly valuable. I respect all of your time. I respect the fact that you listen to this podcast. Of course I do. But I also respect the fact that it's not humanly possible to show up every single time and nail it. You know what I mean? And I think that overwhelms a lot of people. I think that people get this idea in their heads. They get this, they create this idea of what something is, what something means, what something has to be. They build up this character for what it means to start a podcast or to do a podcast, because it isn't just about starting. That overwhelming feeling doesn't disappear as you start. It continues every time you allow yourself to drop into that mode of this needs to be up to a certain level. Every single, it's not just the case of this was something that I experienced on my first episode and then I got rid of it. It happens every single week, but I've become comfortable with the fact that showing up is better than not showing up. Showing up and doing something is better, way, 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 way better than not doing it at all. Even though sometimes they're going to be episodes where I phone it in, even though they're going to be 70%ers, sometimes I might hit the mark. And that's the thing as well. Maybe last week was a 100% episode. People loved it. I loved it. And it worked really, really well. And then this episode, by comparison, even though it's a 70%er, is going to feel horrible to me. I need to be comfortable with that because I know that showing up is more valuable than not showing up. So I want to try and encourage each of you to lower your expectations as far as building up this idea of what something is. You know, when I speak to my friends and when I speak to my friends outside of this industry who aren't creatives but have ambitions as far as starting businesses or have ambitions as far as starting side hustles or clothing brands or whatever it is, they have these ambitions. They build up what it means to do these things. They have this big overarching kind of character or caricature of what it means to do the tasks that is in front of them, and it makes it so overwhelming that they don't do it. You know, at the end of the day, starting a business is as simple in Australia. I can't talk for any other countries. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but I know for a fact there's a fair bit of paperwork you need to do in the US, and I could be wrong, but essentially all you need to do to start a business here in Australia is go and get yourself an ABN, go and register your business name or register your name if you're a sole trader and start making money. That's it. That's all you need to do. to start a business. That is all you need to do to start a business. But people have this big overarching's the wrong word. I think that's the wrong word, but they have this big scary version of what that thing means to actually do. And it frightens them away from something that shouldn't frighten them in the first place. It makes it more intimidating than it actually is, and it scares them off from doing something that is actually quite simple. And it's the same with podcasting. It's the same with a creative venture. It's the same with making YouTube videos. It's like you're never, even though, showing up is going to be more valuable than not showing up at all. I had this, someone messaged me back and forth all the time about this topic, and I want to sort of say it here because I think it is valuable. It's like, it's the quality over quantity argument, or the quantity over quality argument. And I'm a strong believer in you can't achieve quality unless you go through quantity. I don't think you can get to, there is this, I genuinely believe, let's take this back. To find success, you need quality. No exceptions. To find success as a creative person on YouTube, on podcasting, on Instagram, in whatever you do, you need a level of quality. You need to put your best work forward for you to find success. That's a no exceptions. Does not fucking matter who you are. That is the bare minimum to succeed. The bare minimum to succeed is quality. But how do you achieve that quality? Because if you're someone who doesn't currently have that level of quality, then you focusing on only putting your quality first is never going to get you there. So you need to make sure that you stick to quantity. I think I spoke about this last week. It's like nothing's ever wasted. Nothing is ever a missed opportunity. Nothing is ever something that there's no wasted time in this. There is never wasted time. If real life podcast, for example, I have ambitions to eventually make a nice supplementary income podcasting. I think that would be awesome. If at some point down the line, Spotify go, hey, Tom, we love the podcast. We'd love to give you a little exclusive deal and you can come over here and I make a little bit of money or whatever it is, or somehow this turns into a supplementary thing. I don't think I'll ever do it full time because I enjoy too many other aspects of my creativity. But this is something that I really enjoy and I find it very easy. So it's something that I have ambitions towards. But I'm not naive to the fact that this podcast might be the first in a chain of podcasts that gets me to that point. And just because that's the case doesn't put me off the fact that real life podcast might not be the vehicle to me achieving that goal, but it's one of the vehicles on that journey. It's part of that journey. There's never wasted opportunities. And that's the kind of the quantity will lead to quality thing. It's you have to go through that. You have to make videos. You have to take photos. You have to do the thing that you want to do over and over again to get yourself to the point where you have the bare minimum requirements to succeed. Does that make sense? It's like, I think so many people are overwhelmed by They overwhelm themselves. They talk up what it means to do certain things and they overwhelm themselves. I said this a while ago, but my brother had recently had an idea for an app. He's young. He's 19 and he's starting his apprenticeship and he has an idea for an app that relates to his trade, because he had an idea that came to mind because he was having difficulty with buying certain products and he was like, this would be a great idea. And he came to me and he came to my old man. And my old man's first response, rather than going, that's a great idea, you should do it, is, okay, what are you going to do about it? And I thought that was a great lesson because it showed that it's like, it minimized the idea and emphasized action. It minimized that, you can feel it's that mental masturbation where you feel like you're being productive. It's what I was stuck in for a very long time with my course. It's what I've been stuck in for a very long time. No, it's what I avoided with this podcast. I threw myself in the deep end with this podcast and here I am, rather than concerning myself with having the perfect layout or having the perfect branding or having the perfect story. I've changed the branding on this podcast twice since I started. And that's because I threw myself in the deep end and didn't really concern myself with having the perfect branding right from the get-go. And that's kind of what I thought was such a great lesson when my old man said that to my brother. It's like he completely disregarded the idea. He encouraged the idea, but he overemphasized action over the idea itself. And the first thing my brother did was booked a meeting with someone who's capable of doing apps, someone who has experience in that field, booked a meeting with that person and went through the idea with them. And that's now gotten to the point where he's taken action. It might lead nowhere. Hell, my brother might have ambitions to make apps in the future. It might be something that he actually does find success in. Is this app or this idea going to be the vehicle to get there? Maybe not. It might. It might not though. But that doesn't make it a wasted opportunity. And that's because he wasn't overwhelmed, or he didn't build up this idea of what it means to start an app. It's a big task. It's a monumental task, but he took the action necessary to start on that journey. So try to just focus on not oversizing, or not, I can't think of the word, but not building up something that doesn't actually need that much attention. I'm lost for words with this, what I'm trying to say here. But what I'm trying to say is essentially like, don't make something bigger than it needs to be. Don't build up something to be bigger than it actually is. Try to bring your expectations down. If you're starting a podcast, try to be the person that's like, hey, I would love for every episode to be valuable, but I'd also love to show up for 45 minutes every week. And in that, you'll find what works for you now. You'll find your quantity that will lead to quality. If you're someone, for example, who loves taking photos or loves painting, let's say painting, and right now, you have ambitions of being a brilliant photorealistic portrait painter, but right now you're not very good. It's like if you were focused on creating photorealistic portraits, you'd only create a small amount of work. You need to find that linkage between how much you're making and how good it is. And sometimes you're closer to here, sometimes you're closer to here. But it depends on what part of your journey you're on, what level you're on. For me right now, I would love for every single episode I make to be incredibly valuable. I would love for you to leave every episode of this podcast and sit back and go, that was a great episode. I'm fired up. I'm motivated. I'm going to go and do something. I would love for that to be the case. I would really love for that to be the case. But I'm realistic. I'm realistic in the sense that A, I'm young. I don't have an endless fountain of experience to draw from. I only have my lessons. I've only got my experience to draw from. So that means that by that measurement, I'm not going to be able to make an hour valuable every single week. But what I can do, I'm a pretty good talker. I'm pretty good at rambling. I'm pretty good at just coming up with ideas on the fly. I'm pretty good at filling an hour. So I'd rather fill an hour every week. And that's led to a situation now where we're not getting amazing listeners. We're not charting by any means. But I've showed up for 33 weeks in a row. And we have consistent listeners. We have people who enjoy this podcast. And that's something that is way more valuable than focusing purely on quantity. The second part of this topic that I wanted to talk about here, and it's something that has become way more obvious to me since scaling my business and hiring an editor and working with other people and starting to pay other people. Like I hired a copywriter this week to go over my website. That's a ridiculous thing that I wouldn't have even imagined doing a while ago, but it's something that I saw as valuable. If you guys listen to the Jai Long episode, I'm now having my editor edit my podcast because that's something he encouraged me to do. Both of those things aren't things that I'm ready for. I'm not financially ready to hire someone, but I know that the value that I'll find in that will help me get to the point where I am financially capable of doing it. I back myself enough, and I've also had enough experience. This isn't blind ambition. I have built a comfortable income for myself prior to COVID with freelancing work. So I know that at my most productive, I am capable of sustaining myself and someone else. So it is something that's at least a little bit realistic, but I'm certainly not ready to do it. But the thing that I've noticed is you're never ever going to be ready. You're never ever going to be ready to do the things that you want to do. You're never going to be in the perfect spot. You're never going to have all your ducks in a row to do something the way you want to do it perfectly. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I want you to actually make it your mission to start before you're ready. Not just do it in the sense that it'll get you to do something and it'll get you moving and you'll take action prior to being ready, but in the sense of actually make it your mission to put yourself in those situations more often. If I think about all the times that I've started a big task, all the times that I've, say, started, all the different branches of my business that I've started, everything that I've done, it's always been a sink or swim situation. It's always been, I've had the idea and I've gone for it and then figured it out after the fact. Now, that might not be the smartest situation in every circumstance. There might be times where that is a dumb thing to do. But I think that preparedness, that readiness is never going to show up anyway. It's not coming, so you might as well make it your mission to avoid that preparedness. Do something and learn from doing. Try to throw yourself in the deep end more often. Try to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. You're never going to have the content perfectly set out before you make your first YouTube video or make your first digital product or online course. A lot of the times, the first thing that you do, the first time that you do something, it's going to be a chaotic mess. The first time that you do something, the first time you set out and actually challenge yourself, it's going to be a fucking mess. It's going to be chaotic as hell. The first podcast that I made was a mess. There was like 50 cuts in it. I restarted and started the microphone 3 or 4 times. Hell, that continued. That actually continued. It's not even going to be the first time. It's going to be the first few times. It might be the first few months of doing something. There was a long period there where I did this podcast. I stopped doing the video version of it because I wasn't confident enough to talk and feel like I was actually making a cohesive point. So what I did was I stopped recording them and I started recording just the audio, and I looked at my computer screen and I had everything laid out in the podcast, and I would do sections, then restart the camera and go again. There were even a few times where I had to stop, go back and listen to what I just said and then start again because I wasn't comfortable enough to do that. That's a mess. That podcast is a chaotic mess and difficult to edit, difficult to do, a pain in the ass. It wasn't good. I'm sure it sounded okay because I made the cuts invisible for you guys to hear, but it was a mess to do. But that's because, how else am I going to prepare for that? How else am I going to get myself to this point now where I'm confident enough to keep the camera rolling? I have to start and stop the camera every half an hour because I'm shooting on a DSLR, which is a pain in the ass. But beyond that, this is now something where I am confident enough to get on here and talk and be confident that I'm going to cover the points that I want to get to. But that only came because I went through that mess. You need to go through that chaotic mess to understand that through the chaos are the actual lessons that provide the biggest rewards. Those moments of, aha, this makes sense. Those breakthrough moments, the times when you actually begin to realize what's required, or you actually begin to learn the lessons that are needed to do the things that you're doing, only come when you're right in the thick of it and you're going through that chaotic mess of a beginning, the disaster of a beginning. Those are the uncomfortable moments, the challenge where you've provided yourself with enough stress that it is essentially a sink or swim moment. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to learn to swim. You're not going to have that sink or swim response, the fight or flight response, to actually learn what you need to do or actually learn the valuable lessons that are going to provide the most valuable when you're sitting preparing to do something. It's only by actually doing it that you'll begin to learn those lessons. You'll begin to notice that, I actually should probably prepare my episodes a little bit more before starting to have a cohesive episode that I can record on camera and actually make any sense without having a million cuts. I should actually put some effort into organizing my thoughts throughout the week so I've got a piece of an area of content that I can pull from throughout the week, or pull from on a Sunday afternoon and go, hey, that was a point that I thought about here that's going to fit really well in the podcast. I've done all these things now because I went through that period of not being able to cohesively control my conversation for 45 minutes straight. I didn't know that that was going to be a thing. I would never have known that that was going to be a situation that I'd go through. You know, you're never going to learn that the content that you make is uninteresting unless you post the content and get no views. Like, if you're preparing for a YouTube video and you're reading over the content, you're like, this is great, this is great, this is great. It is great until that point. You're never going to learn that it's shit until you throw yourself in the deep end, post the episode, and get no views. But it's both ends of the spectrum. Like, you're never going to learn that, hey, I actually really love podcasting, unless you start podcasting and be consistent and actually learn what it takes to be consistent and do this regularly. You're not going to learn that unless you do it. You're not going to become you're not going to learn what's necessary to actually do the thing that you need to do unless you throw yourself in the deep end. You know, I hate to bring it back to, you know, I find myself always bringing it back to my training, but it is, you know, it is it has been such a interesting, like, learning tool for me. It's been such a valuable way of providing myself with continuous lessons about myself and really digging deep into who I am, because it's doing something that's challenging. Like, if I've said the line that I love, I did a whole episode on this, so I would highly recommend you go and listen to it. But it's like, you know, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but deeper than that, it's going through those challenging things. It's putting yourself in front of a challenge voluntarily, continuously, and routinely, in which you'll actually learn, you know, what you're capable of. You know, you'll learn that, hey, I'm actually really fucking tough. Hey, I actually have, you know, I'm actually someone that's capable of doing something that's really challenging. And that is so valuable, not only for helping you in business, but helping you in life. Like, I highly encourage each of you to pick something that's challenging, and it doesn't need to be extreme. You know, it's all relative. This is all relative. Someone going out and running a kilometer a day, or hell, someone going out for a walk every single day might be an extremely challenging thing for them right now. So it's all relative. Don't take into consideration what I do for a challenge. I've loved exercise and loved training for the last 10 to 15 years of my life. So it's a big part of my routine already. This was just an extension of that challenge, but my biggest lessons as a young adult have always come from challenging myself and not just going through challenging situations. Like, you know, you learn a lot from, say, a breakup or a bad financial situation or bad situations with kids that pick on you or whatever it is. Like, there's all sorts of challenges that people go through in life, like going broke and falling out of business and all that sort of stuff. And but those moments are always the most rewarding as far as what you learn in those moments about yourself. And I think that you can sort of artificially do that by voluntarily challenging yourself every single day, by, you know, running 10 kilometers a day every day for a year, or by signing up for an endurance event when you've done no training and you're 3 months out and you have to kind of, you know, you've just made a commitment that you're either going to train or it's really going to hurt. Those are the kind of things where it can teach you so much, not only about business and not only about life, but about yourself. It is also just a really good, you know, indicator of the start before you're ready principle. It's like, you know, it by its very nature of signing up for, say, an Ironman or signing up for a marathon, you either start or you're never going to be ready. The very activity that you need to do is part of your preparedness for the thing that you're doing. And it's kind of one of the only, I mean, it makes sense in every other regard. It's like you would want to make more videos before you succeed at making videos. You would want to make more music before you succeed at making music. But there's this weird kind of disregard for that with creativity where it's like I need to be perfectly prepared before I make my perfect video. It's like, no, you need to make 1,000 shitty videos before you make your perfect video. You need to go on 1,000 10-kilometer runs before you can run a marathon. You need to ride and run and swim thousands of hours before you can go and compete in an Ironman. That's really obvious in training. It's really obvious in my training. But for some reason, I have in my mind the idea that it's like, okay, I can get away with, not making videos and somehow pull a great video out of my ass. I've gotten into directing lately, and it's really difficult. Like, I'm directing a skit for Art Grid, and we filmed it last week, and my God, it was such a great challenge for me to go through. Because I love the idea of eventually directing documentaries. That's a big ambition of mine, to do documentary filmmaking and to direct documentaries and to shoot my own documentaries and all that sort of stuff. And this was my first time sort of directing and producing a scripted, story-driven commercial. And it was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. And it's probably going to be shit. It looks great, and all the technical sides of things are great because I've gone through that technical challenge of learning and being really crappy with a camera and being really crap with lighting and being really crap with audio. I've gone through all those challenges, but I haven't yet gone through the challenge of how to take an idea and convert it into dialogue and then convert it on screen. I haven't gone through those challenges yet, but I'm exposing myself to those challenges because I'm aware of the fact that I'm not going to be able to make something that's going to be perfect first, fresh out of the box. It's not going to happen. I need to make 1,000 shitty tutorials or 1,000 shitty videos or 1,000 shitty commercials or 1,000 shitty documentaries before I can make that perfect thing. And that gives you the confidence, and it comes back to this whole thing before. Lower your expectations or lower your idea of what something is. Lower your, I don't want to encourage you guys to create things that aren't your best work. Like I said at the start of this episode, put your best foot forward. Always put your best foot forward, but don't make it your priority to only put your best work out there. Does that make sense? It's a spectrum. It's a spectrum between what you're capable of and what you want to achieve. Sometimes you lie a little bit closer to the not so capable end, and sometimes you lie a little bit closer to the capable end. But it's a spectrum. It's about figuring out at what point do I currently lie on. For example, with me, I'm very inexperienced with directing. I've shot a lot of my own work, but most of those situations I have maybe an assistant and maybe someone doing audio or lighting, but rarely am I directing something. Rarely am I taking an idea, converting it into dialogue, and then converting it to appearing the way I want it to on screen. That's not something I'm experienced in. So I'm closer to the not so capable end of that spectrum. For something like Photoshop, I'm closer to that capable end of the spectrum. For podcasting, I probably lie, maybe if we're talking from here to here, I probably lie a little bit closer to the bottom half of the capable spectrum. And I'm okay with that because I'm realistic. I'm aware of the fact that if I showed up every single week and I'm like, I'm only going to post this episode that I record now if it's a banger, I would never post an episode. I would never show up. It would never get off the ground because I'd never have any work to show for myself. I'd never have anything to show that I'm capable of the things that I want to do. Like, I think you need to take that into consideration. You need to take the fact that although your ambitions might be here, you might still be here. And it's about sticking with that zone or finding that perfect balance for you, because it is a balance. It's like if your ambitions are for this perfect movie that you want to make, but you've never made anything before, then you could spend all the time in the world, but it's never going to equate to this. Whereas if you just focused on, hey, I'll make this one, and then I'll make this one, and then I'll make another one, and I'll make another one, and I'll make another one, and then maybe I'll make that one. none of these go to waste. None of these are wasted. It comes back to this idea. It's like, I have ambitions as a podcaster. Real life podcast may not be there. May not be that podcast that gets me there. It might. There's a chance, but it might not be. And I'm okay with that, because I know that all the lessons that I'm learning here are going to carry me well into the next one, and then into the next one, and then into the next one. And I'm okay with that. That's cool. I don't mind. So start before you're ready. Throw yourself in the deep end. Start your first business. Start your first podcast. Start your first YouTube channel. Start all of these things before you're ready, because you're never going to be ready anyway. That perfect moment, it's such a cliche, and it's beaten within an inch of its life, but it is so true. You're never going to have that perfect moment of being ready. It's one of the things that I pride myself a lot on with my training, and I've fallen in love with it recently, is like last weekend I had a 25K scheduled, a 25K run that I had to do, that it was scheduled in, and I wanted to run a specific time. I woke up in the morning and I could hear the wind violently shaking my window, and I could hear the pellets of rain hitting my walls. It was pissing down with rain and blowing an absolute gale. And I still decided to go out for that run. I still got out there along the beach, borderline being blown over, feeling like I'm running with a parachute because it was so windy, and got the run done. And I pride myself on that. And I think that it's kind of something that you can find a point of pride in. You can go, hey, I'm not going to be ready. I'm never going to be ready to make this video, but I'm still going to do it. I'm never going to be ready to make this podcast, but I'm still going to do it. It can be something that you can make almost like a mental toughness thing within yourself. A thing of saying, hey, this makes me really uncomfortable. This makes me almost cringe inside because I'm not prepared enough, or I'm not good enough yet, or I'm still really nervous about releasing my work because I'm not sure what people will say of it. Make it a point of pride within yourself to go, hey, like, I know this makes me uncomfortable, but I'm a better creator, I'm a better podcaster, I'm a better runner by doing it, by throwing myself into that deep end. And I think it's kind of a hack that you can play with yourself to go, when those moments come up, when that hesitation comes up, when the resistance comes up, as Stephen Pressfield says. It's a book I highly recommend. If you haven't read The War of Art, please read it. But when that resistance comes up, you can make it your mission to go, how many times in a row can you beat it? How many times in a row can you ignore that resistance? How many times can you completely disregard that and still get after it, and then finish that and go, hey, I'm proud of myself for doing that. It might not have been my best work. I might have been phoning it in, but I'm proud of myself. And that's something that you can start to just make you a happier person. When you're someone who overcomes challenge, when you're someone who, does do the things that you want to do, does do what they say they're going to do, or does just make themselves, when you're someone who makes yourself regularly uncomfortable, you have a level of pride that you're capable of doing challenging things. You're capable of doing something that other people might not do. Getting on camera, and, I met a guy last night. He's a young guy who was out vlogging in the city, and it's like, that is awesome. Because I know he's uncomfortable. I know he's concerned with what people think of him. I know that he's concerned about the fact that not many people might watch it. I know he's concerned about all of those things. I know that that's an uncomfortable situation for him. But I know that he's also stoked as fuck when that podcast goes live, when that vlog goes live. It's the same thing for the first 10, 20, 30 episodes of this podcast for me. It's like, it made me uncomfortable finishing an episode and not having listened to it yet, and committing to the fact that, okay, this is the best I'm going to do this week. Because there's a gap between I record on Sunday afternoon and I edit on Monday morning. And if I get to the edit on Monday morning and I listen through it and it's garbage, I don't have the time to record a new episode before it needs to go live. So I have to make a commitment. I have to record the podcast on Sundays, and I have to finish the podcast and know in myself that I'm comfortable with what I've just recorded. I'm not always capable of recalling everything that I did. I'm not always capable of going, and it's why I say it. I say it at the end of every episode. Hey, I'm not sure if it was very cohesive, and that's my doubt. That's that personal self-doubt jumping in and going, Tom, this was shit. This is garbage. What did you even talk about for the last 45 minutes? That's what that is. me saying, hey, I don't know if this is very cohesive. I don't know if it was a very good episode. That's that doubt setting in. But I have pride in myself every time I save all the files, turn off my camera, turn off my computer and go, okay, this is the best that I'm going to do today. This is the best that I could do with these circumstances, with my level of ability and with the time that I was given. It's not necessarily my best work. It's not necessarily the best thing I've ever released. It's certainly not going to be the best thing I ever will release, but it's just a small part of my overall body of work that will get me to the point that I will someday be happy with. So if I can just say one thing to round out this podcast and to make it cohesive, there we go. There's that self-doubt setting in. If I can just give you one thing, start before you're ready and make it a point of pride. Don't just start it because it's like, oh, someone once told me to start before I was ready and I don't really feel very comfortable. I don't feel very capable, but fuck it. Like, we'll throw ourselves in the deep end. Make it a point of pride. Treat it like the bloke who is completely ignorant to the weather in regards to his training routine. Treat it like that person. The girl, the 100-meter sprinter who she completely ignores the fact that it's pouring down with rain and she has to go to the track and run 100-meter repeats. Or treat it like the person who's the endurance swimmer and it's the middle of winter and it's blowing a gale and it's ugly and gross outside and they still go and get in the ocean. Like, treat it like that in the sense that, hey, I don't want to make this YouTube video. I don't feel ready. I don't feel comfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway because I can be proud of the fact that I did it. Kind of hack your mind into finding pleasure. And I know it sounds a little sadistic, but finding pleasure in that uncomfort, because it's through that uncomfort that you'll actually learn the lessons that you need to. You'll go through the challenge or the stress that's going to train your mind to handle those stressful situations. It's going to train your mind to be capable of ignoring that resistance and facing that challenge, because nothing ever gets any easier. It gets easier to be consistent. Like I said at the start of this episode, I'm on a massive wave of momentum right now, but I'm also aware of the fact that could disappear like that. It could disappear on a dime, and I'm okay with that because I know that as long as I commit to showing up, as long as I hold a level of value in this, then I'm going to beat that resistance every single time because I've done it enough times. You get to the point where you've said no to throwing off your run when it's raining outside. You've said no to not doing an episode because you don't feel up to it or you don't feel like you have anything to talk about. You've done it enough times that you know that, hey, this is just that self-doubt. This isn't actually anything that I should listen to. This is just that self-doubt that comes in and goes, hey, you're not worth it. It's not something you're actually capable of doing. Blow off this episode and call it a day. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who listens to this podcast routinely. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you guys give me an hour every week. That blows my mind. And the messages that I get on Instagram from people saying that they, they range from people just saying, hey, I really enjoy listening to you while I commute, to people saying, hey, this has really helped me. And I am so overwhelmed, but also so grateful to every single one of you. So I just wanted to give a little moment to thank each and every one of you. We've also gotten a bunch of new reviews on iTunes. So if you are, I'm going to make that the call to action. I'm going to make that the call to action today. If you are someone who listens on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you listen, I would really, really appreciate it. One, if you could follow on the platform that you listen to. Follows actually really, really help me. I know it doesn't seem like much, especially on Spotify where there's not really any like subscription tab or whatever. There's no it's kind of a weird model of how things are fed to you, but it does really, really help. It really, really help. It indicates to Spotify that, hey, you want to listen to this more routinely, so other people will probably want to listen to it. It's the same thing with YouTube. It's the same thing with iTunes. And if you are on iTunes, I would really, really appreciate it if you could go and leave a review. It doesn't need to be 5-star. I'm not trying to force you guys to leave 5-star reviews. Not at all. I would actually love for you guys to go and leave a genuine review, because I save every single one of them. I have a folder full of all the reviews on my phone that I read through, and I'm so thankful to each and every one of you that do leave those reviews. It motivates me to keep doing this. It does. It really keeps me inspired to do this. I don't weigh too much on that because I do really really enjoy it. I do really enjoy the podcast, full stop. But early days, it is kind of, you need that little dopamine hit. You need something that shows you that you're progressing, that shows you that you're getting better. And messages from you guys saying that you love the podcast, or messages from you guys saying that you listen to every single episode, just shows me that, hey, this is valuable to someone. It might be a small group of people. It is a small group of people still, but it's valuable to someone, and that shows me that it's probably going to be valuable to other people. I just need to stick at it. So thank you so much to every single one of you that listen to the podcast. But as I always say, I'm not your dad. You don't have to do anything I tell you to do. You don't have to go and leave a review. You don't have to share this podcast with anyone, but I would really appreciate it if you did. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you guys next week.